At times will affect the west later. Cloud and rain will clear northeast England through the first part of the morning.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GBNews. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GBNews, the People's Channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Friday and Sunday night from 9, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
We're on the same page again. There's something weird happening.
Let Ian finish. Don't be such a cranky.
That mini budget was the tip of the iceberg.
And on Saturday, my show just got bigger. From 8, it's Mark Dolan's Saturday Night In.
You can't govern a country if you can't speak.
Stop talking.
My God, we reached the end. I've never been early in my life. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
And it's about standards and public life. No, I'll tell you what's hypocrisy, Narinda.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin.
We believe in the UK.
No bias, no censorship.
It just doesn't make sense to me. He wasn't doing his job as Chancellor.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GBNews. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Hello and welcome. I'm Alastair Stewart, and for the next 2 hours I'll be keeping you company on TV and radio with the stories that really matter across the country. Now, amid all the doom and gloom of the economics of the autumn statement, more money for the NHS, but it's told to become more efficient, to cut bureaucracy and targets. Hurrah, I hear you say. But will it work? How would you do it? And more money for education too, as schools are told to do better in skilling up our children for the world of work. Your thoughts too, please. 2 fantastic panels on both subjects. Stay with us right up until 2 o'clock. But first, let's bring you right up to date with all of the day's news. Here's Ray Addison.
Thanks, Alastair. Good afternoon. It's 1 minute past 12. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. In the United States, 5 people have been killed and 18 injured in a shooting at a gay nightclub in Colorado Springs. According to a statement on the club's Facebook page, a number of heroic customers were able to subdue the male shooter. They're describing it as a hate attack. Police officials say a suspect is in custody and receiving treatment for their injuries. The FIFA World Cup kicks off in Qatar today, the first time the event has been held in the Middle East. The opening match will see the home side take on Ecuador, with FIFA hoping action on the pitch will turn the spotlight away from complaints over the Arab nation's human rights record. England captain Harry Kane is expected to wear his One Love rainbow armband, showing support for LGBTQ people during tomorrow's match against Iran. In total, 9 countries are said to be making the same gesture. Amnesty's Nina Navid told us she hopes the Iranian players use the platform to support women's rights.
So I very much hope that the players will do something. And if the players are not able to, because it's fair to say that professional athletes are no exception to the regime's brutality against their own people, our hope is that opposition players, so the England players, may do something in solidarity with women and girls in Iran.
Well, back home, the Housing Secretary has written to every English council leader and social housing provider, warning that deaths like that of Awab Ishak must never happen again. The 2-year-old died as a result of prolonged exposure to mould whilst living in social housing. The chief executive of Rochdale Borough-wide Housing, Gareth Swarbrick, was sacked yesterday due to the council's handling of the issue. Michael Gove says the country must raise the bar dramatically on the quality of housing and ensure that tenants' voices are heard. Elon Musk has reinstated Donald Trump's Twitter account after putting the decision to a vote on the social media platform. 51.8% of Twitter users voted yes in an online poll that received more than 15 million votes. The former president was suspended in Jan 2021 after a pro-Trump group attacked the US Capitol. It comes just days after Mr. Trump announced his plans to run for president in 2024. After negotiations through the night, an agreement has finally been reached at COP27 to help poor countries deal with the impact of climate change. The so-called Loss and Damage Fund will help developing nations bear the cost of disasters such as droughts and flooding. However, a decision on exactly which countries should pay has been left until COP28 next year. UN Chief Antonio Guterres says the deal is not good enough.
I welcome the decision to establish a loss and damage fund and to operationalize it in the coming period. Clearly, this will not be enough, but it is a much-needed political signal to rebuild broken trust. The voices of those on the front lines of the climate crisis must be heard.
The government is denying reports that it's considering negotiating a Swiss-style trading relationship with Europe. Switzerland's trade agreements with the EU give them direct access to parts of the internal market. However, it would take the UK 10 years to change to that deal. Downing Street sources have rejected the claims. New measures introduced today will give longer prison sentences to terrorists if they commit crimes while behind bars. All offences, however minor, will automatically be referred for a police investigation and potential prosecution. The Ministry of Justice says this will increase the likelihood that terrorists stay in prison for longer and create bigger deterrence against further offending. And members of Animal Rebellion occupied Gordon Ramsay's 3 Michelin star restaurant last night. The climate activists held mock menus outlining the environmental costs of items served at restaurant Gordon Ramsay in Chelsea. The group issued a statement saying they're campaigning for a plant-based food system. The spokesperson for the restaurant called the protest incredibly inappropriate and deeply disrespectful. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's get back to Alastair Stewart and friends.
Ray, thanks very much indeed. Lots coming up on health and education in just a moment, but I'm delighted, first of all, to be joined live in the studio to kick off today's programme with GB News political reporter Olivia Utley. And I asked you to do that for 2 reasons. If you're watching on television, you'll see this next bit, but if you're listening on radio, let me just explain. In the Sun newspaper, the country's most read newspaper, there's John Redwood saying, quotes, "The budget will cost us the next election." And in the Sunday Telegraph, they have an interview with Nadeem Zahawi, the chairman of the Conservative Party, who says, "We want to cut tax before the election. That's the way forward." I mean, You and I chatted after the autumn statement, and there were one or two who were sort of slightly optimistic, and then it went down, down, down. This is bloodletting battle commencing.
Absolutely, and basically it feels as though the Tory party is split into two factions, the we can't afford to cut taxes faction and the we can't afford not to cut taxes faction. And in the first camp you've got Nadhim Zahawi and Jeremy Hunt. What Zahawi is saying there is that they want to cut tax before the election, but they don't have a hope in hell of doing it before inflation comes down. Yeah. Their logic is that there's a hole in public finances, that hole needs to be plugged, that'll bring inflation down, and the only way to do it is to raise taxes. Then on the other side, you've got John Redwood and many who think like him, who think that clobbering people with high taxes is just going to push us deeper into recession and put inflation up even more. And what he says, he's got a nice pithy quote here, we should encourage people who want to invest, get on in the world, set up a business, save for the future, work harder and acquire skills. We should not be taxing them more. They are the solution to our economic ills, not the problem, which I think sums it up quite nicely. So basically, it's this row that we had over the summer. Can we afford to cut taxes, or can we not afford not to cut taxes, essentially? And they're going to have to find a solution to it long before the next election, or any hope of winning that is totally over.
Sure. The other crucial fact, and it came out in the conversations I was having yesterday when we looked much more at the economics of the autumn statement, and today, as you well know, we're talking about education and health, is that if the optimistic prospects on inflation are even remotely realised, then interest rates could come down a bit sooner. And for Middle England, badly squeezed Middle England, that means potentially lower mortgages. That could be a game changer, but it too, in my humble opinion, is a hell of a gamble.
Well, absolutely, and it feels as though Jeremy Hunt has put everything on the hope that we can get through this recession quickly with these tough measures that he's imposed. And by the time we get round to the next election, which, let's remember, could be delayed technically until spring 2025, so over 2 years left, the hope is we could be through this recession already, coming out the other side, and Middle England, who's seen their mortgages at this point rise up to 5-6%, will be very happy to see them come down to 3%, will thank the Tories and will vote for them in the election. But as you say, it feels like a very big gamble indeed.
We shall watch it with great interest. Olivia, as always, a real pleasure. Thank you very much indeed. I hope you hang around and don't get sent off again like yesterday. So if anything else occurs, we can chat about that too. But for the time being, thank you very much indeed. Olivia Utley there, GB News political reporter. Now, back to our two main themes. A metaphorical bonfire of NHS bureaucrats and targets, plus a serious attempt to make school leavers skilled up and ready to do well for themselves and for us, may not be a revolution, but in my humble opinion, it's a start. In addition to the autumn statement's standouts on the economy, which Olivia and I were just discussing and which we discussed at length yesterday, taxation, growth, inflation, both education and health got the green light for reform. As most government departments were told there were cuts coming down the road, there was more money for schools, but with that tweak on what the government wants them to do, a fresh focus on skills, as well as the basic 3 Rs. Also, there was extra money for the NHS, but again, with the Chancellor saying he wanted a big effort made on efficiency. Well, the Health Secretary himself, Steve Barclay, has gone even further today, both in the Mail on Sunday newspaper and on television earlier. So, today we're focusing on both. State schools in England get an extra £2.3 billion a year for the next 2 years. Mr Hunt also said, and I quote, "I have concerns that not all school leavers get the skills they need for a modern economy." Oddly, there was no extra cash for sixth form colleges or further education colleges where many young people actually get those extra skills beyond reading, writing and arithmetic. But that said, the Chancellor has asked former Labour advisor Sir Michael Barber to help get English schools up to the highest levels in basics and extra skills. The UK, Mr Hunt said, had risen 9 places in the global league tables for maths and reading since 2015, but it needed to do even better. Our current education secretary, he said, left school at 16 to become an apprentice and knows firsthand why good schools matter. So, the right woman in charge, you might say. There are many important initiatives in place, he said, but I want to know the answer to one simple question. Will every young person leaving the education system have the skills that they'd get in Japan, Germany or Switzerland? We'll be talking about that very shortly. On health, Mr Hunt said, we want Scandinavian quality and Singaporean efficiency, as he demanded the NHS tightens its belt, and he found another £6 billion over the next 2 years. Efficiency savings, he said, won't be enough to deliver services that we all need or cut the waiting list. So on both fronts, radical change in the offing, if it can be delivered, in return for your hard-earned money. I have a great lineup of guests on both subjects. We'll come to the NHS a little later, as I said, but I really also want to hear what you think on both subjects. Do you believe that the schools have the wherewithal and the ambition to skill up our children, as well as make sure they have the basic 3 Rs? And how would you make the NHS more efficient, particularly if you're a frontline NHS worker or have recently been to see a GP or been in hospital? We'll do the NHS after education, but send your thoughts in on both, and I'll share the best. It's, as always, GBViews at gbnews.uk. You can tweet at GBNews, or you can tweet me direct, or you can go on Facebook. Now, my first guest is Baroness Nicky Morgan, who's former Conservative Member of Parliament and Secretary of State for Education. Nicky's also a former Secretary of State for Digital, Culture, Media and Sport. And the digital bit, I think, may well be especially useful in this context. Nicky, great to see you. The backdrop to all of this is, of course, the pandemic and lockdown, with many schools and indeed pupils still struggling with catch-up. Even with what's come before, it's still well short of what the catch-up czar, Sir Kevan Collins, said was needed, 15 billion, and he quit when it didn't arrive. Is this enough money to make any difference?
Well, good afternoon. Yes, I think it is. And I think that the fact that Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt, as you said, Alastair, prioritised both health and education, particularly schools, obviously, in what was a very tight economic situation, a difficult autumn statement, should be a great encouragement. I think it's an important statement about the importance of education and skills. And we haven't really heard enough of that, I don't think, from the government over the last few years, perhaps for understandable reasons, thanks to the pandemic. But of course, you know, it's a big amount of money. It's going to restore the per pupil funding to 2010 levels, which is what Rishi Sunak said he wanted to do. But I think at the heart of your question is, how is that money going to be spent? And I think that obviously the big demand is going to be making sure that schools have got wage pressures like everybody else. They've got increased energy bills. So I think probably, you know, teachers up and down the country, head teachers, chairs of governors, will be thinking, actually, I've got this money. How do I make sure that, yes, I can pay my bills, but also that actually the money is going into the right places to really equip our young people for the economy of the 21st century.
As a former education secretary, and you and I have talked about this, we did a brilliant Q&A session at Surbiton High School some little while ago. As a point of principle, do you think it is right that schools looking after young folk up to the age of 16 should be thinking about technical skills, financial skills, and your old stamping ground of digital skills, when roughly 1 in 5 kids still leave secondary school unable to read or write?
I do, because actually the thing that schools do brilliantly, but it's always a struggle, is trying to find what's going to unlock the motivation of a young person to learn, to take on board what they are doing in school, and to think about the future. Now, one of the things I prioritised as well when I was Education Secretary was careers education and inspiration. And we've seen that's not just the secondary schools, that can be happening very effectively in primary schools as well. And we want to see more of that. So I think all of those skills, you know, we have seen obviously improvements in reading and writing and those basic skills, but it is about finding. I always remember going to visit, I think it was Rolls-Royce, met a group of young secondary school, mostly male pupils, who wasn't until they'd gone to the company and they'd seen what people did in the company, and they said, now I understand the maths that I'm being asked to do in school. So I think putting these in context is really important. And look, digital skills are vital for the 21st century, that confidence in digital. We've all had to get more used to digital over the last few years. It's going to be absolutely critical, both for pupils, but also for teachers to feel really confident in this new working environment too.
Yeah. It seems to me the final point, and then I want to ask a general view overall about the autumn statement, but it seems to me at the heart of this all, and you know, Sally and I have got 4 children, and I know that your mum as well, it's about ambition. It's about what one of my later guests, David Harkin, who runs 8 Billion Ideas, is going to say about we all have that potential within us. This is about unleashing it. About time too, Nikki.
I entirely agree. And as I said, one of the things is that, in 2010, when we came in, hopefully during my period as Education Secretary, I think education is a huge opportunity for the country, for the pupils, for the Conservative government to talk about. If we get education right, it absolutely unleashes the talent that we have in this country to help us to be successful, productive and world-leading in so many different sectors. And you're absolutely right. It's about that inspiration. It's about lighting a flame within somebody, about learning for the rest of life, actually being curious. I also talked a lot about character education. Schools are phenomenally important. And I hope, despite the, as I say, continued squeeze on budget, I hope that this statement from Jeremy Hunt and Rishi Sunak in the autumn statement makes it clear just how important they think skills and education are. And Rishi Sunak's talked about the importance of technical education. I think we're going to hear a lot more in this space.
Good. I hope so. I genuinely do. Final question. You're not really standing in Loughborough, but you're now in the House of Lords, but you're still an active Tory. How despondent were you after that autumn statement in terms of its lack of ambition, heading into 2 years of recession, no growth until the other side of the next general election? Did you, Nicky Morgan, feel like giving up and walking away from it?
Absolutely not. And I wasn't despondent. I was relieved that actually Jeremy Hunt and Rishi Sunak are getting a grip on the economy. And I'm afraid if colleagues think that this is an election losing autumn statement, then they need to look at the mini budget, because that really was election losing. And I think I'm delighted that we've got a Chancellor and a Prime Minister gripping this. People should look at the last paragraph of the Office for Budget Responsibility report. And this talks about the UK is facing its 3rd global shock in just over a decade. So yes, of course, there are issues in the UK, but we are facing, inflation caused about by a pandemic, energy crisis caused about by the invasion of Ukraine. We have got a difficult period ahead of us, but I think we've got a sensible plan for tackling it. And so I think from my conversations on doorsteps, now and in the past, actually what people want to see is some honesty at the top about what the challenges are. And I think we saw that on Thursday.
Nikki, a real pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much for fitting us into your busy Sunday afternoon. Keep in touch. You're welcome any time on the programme, as you well know. Thank you. Baroness Nicky Morgan there, the former Conservative Member of Parliament and Secretary of State for Education, Digital Sports, Media and the rest of it. My next guest I referred to in that conversation with Nicky Morgan. He's a very good friend of mine. He is what I would call a been-there-and-done-it guy, formerly a senior IBM man. He created 8 Billion Ideas in the belief that we all have some entrepreneurship in us and other hidden talents just waiting to get out and make the world a better place for ourselves and for our fellow citizens. For some time now, he's been taking that pitch into schools and now has an educational and experience platform for 10 to 14-year-olds after receiving the largest ed-tech seed investment in the world for 2021. David Harkin, a very warm welcome, and it's great to see you again. As I said, you and your people have been doing this in schools, both state schools and private schools, for some time now. When you heard the Chancellor of the Exchequer say what he said about skills, did you blow the roof off with a loud hurrah?
Good afternoon, Alastair. Lovely to speak to you again. And yeah, I mean, the skills agenda, the skills topic has been talked about for decades now. And in my humble belief, I've been very privileged to work across the sector with our academies, our independent schools, international schools, grammar schools, colleges, young offenders units. And I come back to the same conclusion every single time, is that every single child that I've ever met has an amazing imagination. But every child is on a different journey with the amount of skills and indeed belief that they might have. So yet again, we're talking about it, which is great. But what's actually going to happen is what I'm more interested in. We're talking a lot about secondary school education, about supporting that space, which is perfectly right and fine. But really, the whole skills topic needs to start from the early years all the way up until when a child leaves school. We often leave this topic far too late. And if I take the topic of entrepreneurship, which is a big love and passion of mine, it's something which I see in every school. You know, there's not a school I've ever met which isn't doing something in this space, but it's got to be strategic. And it's got to start with our 3, 4, 5-year-olds and getting them really, really excited about their futures and teaching them.
Yeah. What lessons then can we learn specifically from Japan, Germany and Switzerland, who, as the Chancellor himself said, are ahead of us? They're the ones we need to aim for. What are they doing that we're not?
I think we're doing a lot of good things, and you know it's interesting that those countries were selected, and I think we can do occasionally we can misjudge what's actually happening in our schools, Alastair, because they're brilliantly busy places. So much stuff is going on in our schools all across the UK. We've got nearly 1 million people working in the sector, and we're doing some really good stuff. So of course we can learn from different nations, different industries. I think what we need here is an evolution, not a revolution. I think what we need is to actually go into kind of a period of accelerated incremental improvements. You kind of have two types of change: transformational, incremental. We certainly do not need transformational change in education here in the United Kingdom. We need accelerated incremental change. But we've got to start young. And I think the big mic drop moment, or the big kind of real elephant in the room is, yes, okay, there might be some more money going in the next couple of years, but we still live in a sector in the UK where we do not have a clear long-term vision for education. We've been talking about it for a long time, and we're not clear on it. We don't really know what we're working towards in the next 10, 20 years. Personally, I'd love to see a much more passion-led education system. So we're talking about careers, but if my children, I'm a dad of 3 boys, Toby, Harry and Ben, 6, 4 and 6 months, when those boys leave school, I want them to be able to answer one question, Alastair. I would love them to be able to answer, what are you passionate about, Toby? What are you passionate about, Ben? What are you passionate about, Harry? Can you tell me 3, 4, 5, 6 different things? Because if you know what you're passionate about, it's going to help you make decisions on whatever you do with your career. And it's a long career, right? We're going to be doing lots of different jobs. We're seeing the rise of self-employment. And sometimes we pigeonhole children far too young. So I think back here, accelerating incremental improvements, just remind ourselves we need an evolution, not a revolution. And I think, yes, we need to be talking about skills, but we also need to be making sure that children are clear on what they are passionate about.
I totally agree with you on the passion. My final point is your latest book, The Ripple Effect, which I've read and reviewed, is superb. And I was just struck writing the notes about this conversation last night that whether he knew it or not, it is just possible that Jeremy Hunt has dropped something into the pond that, if it's embraced by teachers, school leaders, parents and children, could have a ripple effect and really change everything.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm a big believer in the ripple effect and the pebble, and we all have 2 choices every day to make positive or negative ripples. And yes, people are going to look at this and go, we need more money, we need more money, we need more of this, but there is some money coming in. Let's make sure we're spending it in the best possible way that we can. Let's keep rewarding our teachers. These are brilliant people every day serving our students across the United Kingdom, creating memorable moments. And let's see it as a positive step in the right direction. But please, we've got to start young. We can't keep asking a lot of magic wands to be chucked at our schools and help turn around career aspirations, teaching entrepreneurship, skills of the future far too late. It needs to happen, and we need to be supporting the early years and year 1 and 2 as soon as we possibly can.
David, great to see you. Love to the family. Have a great weekend. Thanks for breaking into it for us. David Harkin there, founder and CEO of 8 Billion Ideas. Sitting next to me is another very good friend of mine, and listening intently to it is Bobby Seagull, academic, TV star, Open University lecturer, this, that and the other. But more importantly, before all of that, an investment banker.
Yes.
Do you agree with David Harkin that this really could be a ripple thing, that whether he knows it or not, the Chancellor's done something here that could change everything?
Yes, for the UK to prosper in the 21st century, we need a really skilled workforce, motivated, those with passions. And again, as a teacher, I will say that education is the most important thing. And I think even Rishi Sunak recently said he thinks that education is the silver bullet for public policy to lead Britain to a more prosperous future. So if we look after our young people from, again, right from David was saying, from 3, 4, 5, all the way through to 18, then actually we are creating the workforce that can make Britain a world leader. So already there are fields like, arts and music and literature where England, the UK, is lauded as a world leader, but I think the science, technology, engineering, maths, entrepreneurship, these are also fields that we need to...
But it's also, crucially, it's also applicability, because I mentioned your Open University course, which is for young adults, about mathematics. Not just how to do dy by dx equals the answer, but how you apply it, whether you're an engineer, Nicky Morgan talked about Rolls-Royce engineers, or whether you're in the city doing forward pricing.
Completely. And I think that's one of the most important parts of education. How relevant is it to your future prospects? Again, as an academic, I enjoy the beauty of calculus and looking at Pythagoras' theorem. You know, I would talk about it all day, but I know that for the vast majority of people, they're not going to use calculus on a day-to-day basis, but they do need to understand the concepts of mathematics so they can apply whether they work in a supermarket, whether they work in a business, whether they work in media. And it's the application of knowledge which is going to be crucial.
Let's be realistic about this as well, because you travel the world lecturing, talking to people and performing on television. Can we really be as good as Japan, as Singapore and as Germany?
It's an aspiration. Things again.
That means no, not yet.
Well, I think there's a way to go. I think culturally we're different. Like if you look at places like China and Japan, they come to Britain to see how are we so good creatively. So that's the one thing. In our quest to be brilliant at the sciences, technology, entrepreneurship, mathematics, we mustn't ignore our creativity. You know, we produce wonderful musicians, writers, our broadcast and media industries are world leading. So if we can combine that with having a workforce that is able to apply their maths and science, I think then we've got a force that's very potent.
Brilliant. Final one, and it's a quick one. I mentioned that you were in the city before as a banker, and you're a chartered accountant as well. Do you share Nicky Morgan's optimism that the Autumn Statement may hurt a bit initially, but it's what has to happen for the UK at the moment?
I think the one thing I'll say is the markets took it quite well. And often when the markets take it quite well, it means actually they see a better long-term future. But the reality is sometimes what the market's like, individual households don't like in the short term. So I think it is a bit of short-term pain that UK PLC and households need to take. But hopefully it will mean 2, 3, 5 years down the line, we will see a more positive outlook.
Well, we all keep our fingers crossed on that, I think. Bobby Seagull, a genuinely pleasure to see you. Thanks for coming in as well.
Always a pleasure.
And joining our conversation. Bobby Seagull there, and David Harkin before him, and Nicky Morgan at the top of it. I hope you found all of that as fascinating as I genuinely did. But we'd all love to hear what you think. Send your emails in or tweet. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends, with lots more coming up on today's programme. The World Cup in Qatar kicks off today. First time the tournament has taken place in the Middle East. Our reporter Paul Hawkins is there ahead of the first game. We'll be catching up with him. But first, let's bring you up to date with the weather here.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, the UK will be unsettled, particularly in the west, with scattered and blustery showers spreading eastwards. Here are the details. This morning's rain and cloud will continue to affect the far northeast of Scotland, where it will also be rather windy, a mixture of sunny spells and blustery showers elsewhere. This afternoon, a mixture of sunny spells and scattered blustery showers will continue across Northern Ireland. However, these showers will become lighter in nature. A band of heavy showers will affect Northern England. These showers may be thundery with hail for western coasts. There'll also be sunny spells. For North Wales this afternoon, there'll be a continuation of showers, but also sunny spells too. Showers will be less frequent than this morning and will also become lighter in nature, breezy as well. A band of showers will move through across the East Midlands this afternoon, and these may be heavy at times too. There will be more sunny spells too, and showers will ease later on. It'll be a mostly dry and fine afternoon for East Anglia with sunny spells, however there may be the odd shower in the west of the region later on. Across the south of England, there'll be a mixture of sunshine and showers. These showers will become less frequent and lighter from the west, windy for coastal regions. Turning drier and clearer for a time early tonight before wet and windy weather arrives in the west later. That's how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Good afternoon, it's 12:32. I'm Ray Addison in the GB Newsroom. In the US, 5 people have been killed and 18 injured in a shooting at a gay nightclub in Colorado Springs. According to a statement on the club's Facebook page, a number of heroic customers were able to subdue the male shooter. They're describing it as a hate attack. Police officials say a suspect is in custody and receiving treatment for their injuries. The FIFA World Cup kicks off in Qatar today, the first time the event has been held in the Middle East. The opening match will see the home side take on Ecuador, with FIFA hoping the focus will now turn away from complaints over the Arab nation's human rights record. Players from 9 countries, including England captain Harry Kane, plan to wear a One Love armband showing support for LGBTQ people. The Housing Secretary has written to every English council leader and social housing provider, warning that deaths like that of Awab Ishaq must never happen again. The 2-year-old died as a result of prolonged exposure to mould whilst living in social housing. Michael Gove says the country must raise the bar dramatically on the quality of housing available. Elon Musk has reinstated Donald Trump's Twitter account after putting the decision to a vote on the social media platform. 51.8% of Twitter users clicked yes in an online poll that received more than 15 million votes. The former president was suspended in January 2021 after a pro-Trump group attacked the US Capitol. After negotiations through the night, an agreement has been finally reached at COP27 to help poor countries deal with the impact of climate change. The Loss and Damage Fund will help developing nations bear the cost of disasters such as droughts and flooding. However, a decision on exactly which countries should pay has been left until COP28 next year. We're on TV, online and on DAB Plus radio. This is the People's Channel, GB News. Back now to Alastair.
Taken place in the Middle East. The first match is between the host country Qatar and Ecuador. England kick off their World Cup tomorrow versus Iran, and Wales will be taking on the United States of America. Well, we're across all of it, both the rows and the debates that are going on, as well as the football. And our reporter Paul Hawkins is there for us, and we can cross live to him now. Paul.
Yeah, hi Alastair. You join us in the Souk Waqif, the market.
Doha, and actually in the last few minutes those are Tunisian fans in full voice behind us in the souk, and they're gathering quite a lot of attention. So when you talk about what this World Cup is going to be like in Qatar, about being a more conservative country, maybe rein it in a bit, they're not having any of it, the Tunisian fans, and they're drawing quite a crowd, as you can see. In fact, we're just getting pushed along here a little bit. I should add Tunisia as well. They're not even playing tomorrow, but they're in full voice there. Anyway, that's the Tunisia fans for you. We'll just mind out of the way. Mind out of the way, we'll turn around this way. This is quite a crowd that's gathered here. But along this part of the souk, there are people coming backwards and forwards all the time throughout the day wearing different football shirts. Over here, there's some Mexico fans over here that are just enjoying their meal. There's another Mexican fan in the corner over there. There's some USA fans over here. And over there in the distance, there's some Welsh fans, Spanish fans. There's people from all over the world here. And they're just getting on with the tournament, really. They know the issues that surround it, but they're getting on with the football. Of course, England play Iran tomorrow. Wales play the USA. Earlier, we were speaking to some England fans on the Corniche. That's kind of like the riverfront, the seafront in Doha. And this is what they had to tell us.
Absolutely amazing. We're really pleased with where we are. Yes, we're a bit far out, but the accommodation couldn't have been better. Friendliness, just no beer. That's fine. Just got to have it as it is. Yeah. Their custom, their country, go with it. We're here for football. Not here for politics or anything else. We're here for the football. Come on, England!
I think just as long as we don't think we're going to breeze through it and think, England's past form hasn't been that good. But it's a different time. If we pick it up, it should be a good game, and we should be okay.
Loads of other fans from other areas, Mexico, Ecuador, Poland, you name it. It's one big party.
Typical England, isn't it? They've always won it before they've kicked the ball, haven't they? And then it's a massive disappointment. Massive disappointment. Yeah.
There you go. So that's what some England fans told us earlier today. Of course, England play Iran tomorrow. It's going to be interesting to see, Alastair, as well, the Iranian team and how they celebrate as well, because Iranian national football, because of the issues in the country, has been played behind closed doors, and a lot of the players, when they score, don't celebrate. They either point to the sky or they go to, as a gesture of solidarity, they cut their hair in solidarity with the women in Iran. So seeing whether they sing the national anthem, will they celebrate their goals? It's going to be interesting, that subplot to tomorrow's game against England. And of course, you've got the England national team playing, and Wales are taking on the USA. And the Welsh, frankly, it's their first World Cup since 1958. They don't care where the World Cup is, they're just happy to be here.
Brilliant stuff, Paul. I'm glad you're there as well. Thank you for not only giving us the facts and figures, but also capturing so brilliantly the atmosphere there in the souk and out and about on the streets. We'll keep in touch with you. Thank you very much indeed. Our reporter, Paul Hawkins, there, who is, as you just saw, live in Qatar for us, covering the entirety of the World Cup. It's 39 minutes past 12, or 21 minutes to 1, with plenty more still to come this afternoon, including with the Health Secretary Steve Barclay admitting today that the NHS is under huge pressure and some targets are to be scaled back. What does it actually mean for our essential services, your NHS and my NHS? Will the additional funding pledged in that budget bridge the gap? But first, let's take a quick break. We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Friday and Sunday night from 9, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
We're on the same page again. There's something good happening.
Let Ian finish. Don't be such a cranky.
That mini budget was the tip of the iceberg.
And on Saturday, my show just got bigger. From 8, it's Mark Dolan's Saturday Night In.
You can't govern a country if you can't speak. Stop talking.
My God, we reached the end. I've never been early in my life. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. There's never been a more interesting but also critical time in British politics, and I can't wait to bring you the biggest stories of the day with the best factual accuracy and also a few of my own opinions thrown in. We'll engage in passionate but always polite debate with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Monday to Thursday, 10 till 12 on TV, on radio and online.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back. It's just slipped past 20 to 1. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and friends here on GB News TV and radio. And you have indeed been getting in touch on our big topic of the day, the autumn statement and other related issues. What would you have liked to have seen in that autumn statement, and what do you make of our discussions today? John begins the conversation and says it would be a start if every time that funding was increased, they showed a breakdown on just how it was being spent. And Mike says, as a Conservative voter who's supported the party for some 50 years, I and my family have had enough. We have illegal immigrants continuing to be allowed into the UK. We see hard-earned tax money being wasted, utilities failing, health and education under stress, and politicians who are just removed from reality. The Conservative Party, he says, are finished. Well, there we go. Food for thought, bearing in mind what Olivia Utley was saying at the very top of our programme. Keep those views coming in and we'll share some more of them. And do subscribe to our YouTube channel as well, where you can catch up on interviews I've already done or previous programmes that we've done. We are at GB News. So let's get back now to the autumn statement of that extra cash specifically for the NHS and the call for efficiencies. The Chancellor said, quotes, "We want Scandinavian quality, Singaporean efficiency." He admitted that efficiency savings won't be enough to deliver the services that we all need, but nevertheless gave it an extra £6 billion over the next 2 years. There's also more money for the NHS in Scotland, which of course is devolved, and in Northern Ireland, and a bit for social care, although that big reform on the cap of care costs is again shelved for the time being. Now, in saying that the NHS budget had already been increased to record levels to deal with the pandemic, he added that he wanted a fresh focus on tackling waste and inefficiency. To help him, the Health Secretary Steve Barclay in that ambition, he confirmed that Patricia Hewitt, a former Labour Health Secretary, would assist with the review of NHS operations. Ms Hewitt is also, interestingly, a former director of Bupa. So let's look at efficiencies in the NHS, a costly public service that some see as almost a religion beyond criticism. I am delighted to be joined by Dr Andrew Vallance-Owen, a good friend of mine for many years, a former NHS surgeon himself, and also a former chief medical officer at Bupa. It's a bit like education in the sense that the existing problems are huge and the extra money that comes with attachments may not be enough, because before he stood up, the NHS was already on a crisis footing, according to the Independent Health Foundation, and says that temporary respite may be achieved by this money, but even big efficiencies are not going to get the NHS through as it stands.
Yeah, and I think that's absolutely right. And the first thing I'd say is, are we absolutely sure that this new money will actually get to the sharp end? Delivery has been a real problem in terms of, the things that the government says are happening in the NHS, and they pull out nice sums of money. But does this money get to the sharp end, the coalface, where the doctors and the nurses and the physiotherapists are doing their work 24 hours a day? And, that's part of the problem, I think, that the money is not getting through to really where it matters. And the pay issues that are coming up from nurses. I mean, the first time ever, I think, was that for many, many years that the Royal College of Nursing has called nurses out on strike. The poor pay, especially in community nurses, in the care sector, has got to be tackled. And that's where I think that money, first of all, needs to go, because we have such a big reduction in the number of nurses in the NHS, in the number of care staff in the care sector. People have left and they're not coming back. Lidl is paying better prices for their shelf stockers than we are paying some of those staff.
We've talked about that before in the past, and it is a staggering situation, and unless that is sorted out, then you won't recruit the numbers to bring it up to standard. But let's focus, if we can, Andrew, on what Steve Barclay says in the Mail on Sunday today, and also said on television a little earlier, and cut to the chase. He says, as indeed many GB News viewers and listeners have said, is that if you stripped out some of the middle management, and they get good pay, perhaps unlike the nurses, strip some of that out, get rid of targets which are really just, oh, here's another target that we appear to have missed yet again, that could make a profound difference. Do you agree with him?
Yeah, I think the people I speak to in the NHS, and my wife, the nurse midwife, has got a lot of friends still working in the NHS, say that there is huge bureaucracy in that middle layer. There is too many layers of management. Trying to get things done is like trying to swim in treacle. And again, you know, the decisions don't really, there isn't proper accountability. I often say to nurses and clinical directors, you know, if you're told something on a phone or in a meeting, don't do it unless you've got a written requirement to do it from that manager, because they need to have greater accountability for what's going on and much more work on delivering, as I've said before, to the nurses and doctors and people who actually deliver our service. That's where the problem is, and we haven't got enough of them.
No, absolutely. And one of my big worries, and let's finish on this if we may, because it echoes what your wife is picking up and what you've picked up as well, is and Michael Portillo said it to me earlier this morning, you know, here we go again, talking the talk but not walking the walk. Why are they so terrified of charges? The Prime Minister himself said there'd be a £10 penalty if you failed to show up for a GP appointment. Then when people shouted him down, he pulled back of it. And this Tory government with an 80-seat majority is terrified about giving tax relief to people and the companies that employ them who say, I'll tell you what, I'm going to look after myself. I'm going to take out private insurance where you used to work and where Pat Hewitt used to work. Why are they so terrified of radical changes like that really could make a difference?
Well, they really shouldn't be. People who take out private insurance and that sort of thing are helping the NHS by taking the load off the NHS, and more people are doing it, although that's partly because the waiting times are up. But I think the idea of a penalty, the thought of how on earth that would be run and the administration costs for it. But we know that in France, particularly, they have a co-payment, a general co-payment for people who want to go and see their general practitioner, which, like prescription charges, is not applied for people who are chronically ill and have certain conditions. And that would be an easier thing to administer, I think, that everybody would have to pay, £20 or something like that before going to a GP. So make them at least think twice before they go, you know, if they really need to go. I know the counter-argument is that people will say, oh, well, people won't want to go because it's going to be an extra cost. But I do think we have to think in those sorts of terms, Alastair. I think that is absolutely right.
Well, let's hope Steve Barclay and Pat Hewitt look at those alternative systems as well. For the time being, thank you for, as always, shedding your expert light on these matters, and you keep in touch with us, Andrew. Best to both of you. Have a lovely weekend. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks.
Dr. Andrew Vallance-Owen there, former NHS surgeon and also former Chief Medical Officer at Bupa. Sticking with the Chancellor's autumn statement now, within it, Jeremy Hunt announced a range of tax measures that will affect the farming industry. While the changes will impact most businesses, those income tax changes, the effects will be fairly moderate according to advisors from the farming industry. Well, advisors, one wonders. To discuss all of that and what it means for the industry, I'm delighted to be joined by an old friend of the programme, Andrew Ward, also known as Wheat Daddy. Good to see you, and always good to see your John Deere sitting there in the background looking utterly magnificent. The NFU seem to be most exercised about changes to capital gains tax and business rates, but as someone who's actually at the front end doing it, what are your concerns, Andrew?
Well, those are concerns, yes, but they're not as big a concern we've got regarding inflation, because the inflation figure at the minute on agriculture is running at around about 35%. And so it's us producing food with having to deal with all those high input costs is a massive thing. And I mean, when you look at the autumn statement as well, and I think really you ought to be calling it a lockdown statement now, really, because that's what we're doing. We're now actually having to pay back everything that happened with lockdown. We were told to eat out to help out, or that might as well have been termed eat out to help out, but we're going to want it back with interest later. Furlough, all that sort of thing as well, where people were paid as well. And in agriculture here, we kept working, we kept doing everything, producing food, looking after the environment, looking after nature, and now we're being penalised for it.
It's a fascinating analysis there, and don't forget who was the Chancellor of the Exchequer during all of that as well, the chap who's now the Prime Minister. But do you accept something that my good friend Bobby Seagull said on the programme earlier? Because you mentioned inflation in that analysis, and he said if these measures do work to bring inflation down, then we'll all benefit. And sometimes what the Treasury does is not what you and I want done, but it is the right thing to do. Is inflation the real bête noire for you as a farmer and me as a consumer?
Absolutely, Alastair. That, for me, is the number one thing that is really hitting us hard, coupled with the war in Ukraine. And of course, that's where a lot of fertiliser comes from, and Russia out there. A lot of fertiliser has come from those countries in the past. And our fertiliser costs have risen 300% in the last 2 or 3 years. And fuel as well, red diesel that we use in this tractor behind me here, red diesel's risen 200%. So we are facing huge inflation figures. And yes, the UK as a whole, inflation figures are, what are they, 12 or 13%? But with our inflation figures of triple that, producing food and looking after the environment. And we need to remember here, Alastair, that looking after the environment, protecting nature, everything that everybody sees when they drive around the countryside, it doesn't come cheaply. It doesn't just happen. And it costs a lot of money to do that. And I think we also need to look here and mention the Brexit word, and I voted to remain, but I think Brexit's really hitting hard now, because I had we've got a local sugar beet haulage, or sugar beet contractor rather, who lifts our sugar beet. He had a hydraulic pump go, and he ordered another one, and he was quoted a 46-week delivery from Europe. And I think it's all these things now that's just hitting hard, and it's not just the inflation figure, but it's Brexit, it's everything to do with the cost of living and running the country, and actually living in the UK, which at one time of day it was a glorious thing to do, but now you just wonder whether you look at other countries around the world, is the UK the country that it used to be?
I didn't interrupt for a moment. Fascinating analysis there, as always. That's why we asked you on, Andrew, because we get it then not from some lobbying organisation, but from the front line. Great to talk to you, and thanks for sharing your magnificent tractor behind you there. Just love it.
Thank you, Alastair.
You take care of yourself, Andrew, and good luck on the farm. Arable farmer there, Andrew Ward, Wheat Daddy. And look forward to having him on the programme again very, very soon. Taking us to the top of the hour, this is a brilliant pre-Christmas story. A recent study by Familio found that just over half the United Kingdom were worried that their grandparents will feel lonely during Christmas. I speak as a grandparent, as you may or may not know if you follow me and Jim Jam on social media. Familio is an app a thing you have on your phone, and it's taken France by storm. It allows young family members to upload photos and messages, which are then compiled into a personalised newspaper for the grandparents and posted monthly. Its mission is, and I quote, to bring joy to grandparents. Well, joining me now to discuss it is Nadine Culcott, who is the head of communications at Familio, and there you are. I hope I've given a reasonable appraisal of what it actually does, but you actually live in France, where it is literally huge.
It is, Alastair. Thank you for having us. Yes, you explained wonderfully how it works. And in France, yes, it's quite well known here. It did take France by storm. We have over 200,000 families using Familio to connect with their grandparents. That's over 1 million members.
Talking earlier on in the programme about skilling up our young people, is it particularly techie? I mean, even I can download an app. That's a piece of doddle. But when you're talking about compiling a family newspaper, this is what the little ones have been up to, this is what the garden looks like at the moment. Do you have to be very techie to be able to do it?
Not at all. We've tried to take anyone who uses the internet, whether that's children or grandchildren, making it as intuitive as it can be for those people who do use the internet. So it's incredibly simple. It's much like the sort of social messaging apps that no doubt many families watching this use already. I think there's a video showing right now that shows it really is very simple.
Yeah, very well spotted. There was indeed. And now somebody thumbing through a book. Because the other thing that struck me about it is particularly a lot of our American friends send us Christmas cards that are absolutely stock-a-block with pictures of what the little ones are up to and this, that and the other. I mean, this is a 21st century version of it. You've launched now in the UK. I think it was in August. How has it gone? Yes. Has it got momentum yet?
Yes, I mean, it's picking up. We already had some people using it just from word of mouth from over the channel. And so far, the reception's been wonderful. People really love it. I think the UK already, you spoke about America, but the UK as well has a culture of sending cards as a way of it's a show of thoughtfulness and it's got a sentimental value to really post something. And so I'm hoping to bring a lot of joy to UK grandparents as many as French grandparents.
Well, I'm sure you will, and thank you for sharing that. And just to remind folk at home, if they're interested, it's called Familio. Go online and you can find it and understand even more about it than my conversation with Nadine. But I hope that was helpful. Nadine, great to meet you. Keep in touch and thank you very, very much indeed. Nadine Culcott.
Thank you very much.
Communications and the Familio app. It's just inching towards 1 o'clock and you're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends with more coming up on the other side of 1 o'clock. The former England goalkeeper, Peter Shilton, will be back on the programme here, this time to talk about the World Cup, which, as you may have heard, kicks off a little later today. But first, a quick break.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. Over a drink, we have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio
and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Stein Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Stein Show.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes & Co. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes & Co.
Hello, welcome. It is 1 o'clock plus 6 seconds. I have to be pedantic about that. Welcome if you've just joined us. Hello again, and thanks very much indeed for being with us since 12, if that is what you've been up to. I am Alastair Stewart, and we're into our second and final hour of the programme, keeping you company here on TV and radio, with lots more still to come, including further discussions about the autumn statement. Are you happy with the Chancellor's announcements, or are you still fearing a winter of discontent and a couple of years of doom and gloom? Do let us know what you think. But first, let's bring you right up to date with all of the day's news. Here's Ray Addison.
Thanks, Alastair. Good afternoon. Coming up to 1 minute past 1, here's the latest from the GB Newsroom. In the United States, 5 people have been killed and 18 injured in a shooting at a gay nightclub in Colorado Springs. According to a statement on the club's Facebook page, a number of heroic customers were able to subdue the male shooter. They're describing it as a hate attack. Police officials say a suspect is in custody and receiving treatment for their injuries. The FIFA World Cup kicks off in Qatar today, the first time the event has been held in the Middle East. The opening match will see the home side take on Ecuador, with FIFA hoping action on the pitch will turn the spotlight away from complaints over the Arab nation's human rights record. England captain Harry Kane is expected to wear his One Love rainbow armband. It shows support for LGBTQ people during tomorrow's match against Iran. In total, 9 countries are said to be making the same gesture. Amnesty's Nina Naveed told us she hopes the Iranian players use the platform to support women's rights.
So I very much hope that the players will do something. And if the players are not able to, because it's fair to say that professional athletes are no exception to the regime's brutality against their own people, our hope is that opposition players, so the England players, may do something in solidarity with women and girls in Iran.
Well, in the last hour or so, comedian Joe Lycett has shredded £10,000 of his own money in protest at David Beckham's role as an ambassador at the Qatar World Cup. Online footage shows the comic throwing 2 bundles of notes into a shredder. Mr. Lycett had issued an ultimatum to the former England footballer after it was reported that he'd signed a deal with the tournament hosts worth up to £10 million. The comedian offered to donate the money to LGBTQ+ charities if Mr. Beckham ended that sponsorship. Homosexuality is still illegal in Qatar and can be punishable with up to 7 years in prison. The Housing Secretary has written to every English council leader and social housing provider, warning that deaths like that of Awab Ishaq must never happen again. The 2-year-old died as a result of prolonged exposure to mould whilst living in social housing. The chief executive of Rochdale Borough-wide Housing, Gareth Swarbrick, was sacked yesterday due to the council's handling of the issue. Michael Gove says the country must raise the bar dramatically on the quality of housing and ensure that tenants' voices are heard. Elon Musk has reinstated Donald Trump's Twitter account after putting the decision to a vote on the social media platform. 51.8% of Twitter users voted yes in an online poll, which received more than 15 million votes. The former president was suspended in January 2021 after a pro-Trump group attacked the US Capitol. It comes just days after Mr. Trump announced his plans to run for president in 2024. Well, after negotiations through the night, an agreement has now been reached at COP27 to help poor countries deal with the impact of climate change. The so-called Loss and Damage Fund will help developing nations bear the cost of disasters such as droughts and flooding. However, a decision on exactly which countries should pay into that fund has been left until COP28 next year. United Nations Chief Antonio Guterres says the deal isn't good enough.
I now invite the COP to adopt the decision entitled Sharm el-Sheikh Implementation Plan contained in document.
Well, we'll hear from him in just a moment. New measures introduced today will give longer prison sentence to terrorists if they commit crimes while behind bars. All offences, however minor, will automatically be referred for a police investigation and potential prosecution. The Ministry of Justice says this will increase the likelihood that terrorists stay in prison for longer and create bigger deterrents against future offending. Justice Secretary Dominic Raab is describing it as a landmark agreement between the Prison and Parole Service, Crown Prosecution Service and counter-terrorism policing. Members of Animal Rebellion occupied Gordon Ramsay's 3 Michelin-starred restaurant last night. The climate activists held mock menus outlining the environmental costs of items served at restaurant Gordon Ramsay in Chelsea. The group issued a statement saying they're campaigning for a plant-based food system. A spokesperson for the restaurant called the protest incredibly inappropriate and deeply disrespectful. OK, you're watching GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's get back to Alastair Stewart and friends.
Ray, thanks very much indeed. 6 minutes past 1, more now on the autumn statement. We're moving on now away from education specifically and focusing on business and trade. The Chancellor announced that the government's £13.6 billion of support for businesses over the next 5 years, with business rate multipliers also being frozen in 23-24. The Office of Budget Responsibility says average disposable incomes, however, will fall by 7.1% over the next 2 years, which means less money for businesses, because there's less money there for you and me and everybody else to spend. We are in a recession now and will remain in a recession next year, with growth only just returning in 24-25. So how will that all impact on UK trade and Britain's businesses? I am absolutely delighted to be joined by my dear friend, Lord Digby Jones, former CBI Director General, international businessman, and of course crossbench peer in the House of Lords, Trade Minister under Gordon Brown. Before we come to that, when I knew we were doing education and health at the beginning, I remember a conversation you and I had years ago where you said one of the biggest single problems for British industry is the number of young people leaving school who still can't read or write. And here we are talking about spending a lot of money in our schools to skill them up. Is this possibly, and I want you to be optimistic, killing 2 birds with 1 stone?
Yeah, good afternoon, Alastair, and good afternoon, everyone. I think it could be. As you know, I'm absolutely passionate about getting young people into the world of work, and they can't do that if they can't read, write, and count. And it has been getting better the last few years, without doubt, but it's still very poor. By the way, it's very poor in America, Germany, and France. Would you believe? It's a Western democratic capitalistic issue. And that is that too many people can't read, write and count to the standard expected of an 11-year-old. And you haven't a hope in an advanced economy where you've got to become more productive, not by working harder, but by working more cleverly. If you can't read an instruction manual, you haven't got a prayer. And that I think is a big, big issue. I repeat, it's better than 10 years ago, but it's still not good enough.
And I also do think, we now move on, but I do think, as he observed as well, the fact that you've now got an education secretary who didn't go to Oxford or Cambridge but did an apprenticeship may just be one of the most important political facts at the moment. Let's talk about the autumn statement. Straight question, what did you make of it?
Well, I was surprised the next morning when it got, by and large, panned in the media, because I actually thought it was very good. I thought Jeremy Hunt stood there with the air of a bank manager saying, you know, this is good for you. And at the same time, he kept some of those, a lot more actually, of that help for those not so well off. He kept it there. And I have in mind particularly the 10% rise in pension income. Why, for the life of me, they don't bring in means testing for pensions is beyond me, because there'll be an awful lot of people who are going to get 10% pay rise in their retirement pension, who frankly, of course they would like it, but do they need it? And there are a lot of people at the bottom end of pension receipt who desperately need it. So I'm not saying it shouldn't have happened, but I am surprised, given that desperate times call for desperate measures, they didn't bring in a degree of means testing. The other thing that I did like to see was this acknowledgement that, Jeremy Hunt, I'm Chancellor of a government that actually you, Prime Minister, when you were Chancellor, handed out all this money to really make sure that people could get through the pandemic. And then, he didn't quite use these words, but now comes the time to pay for it.
Yeah.
And the trouble is, I think, too many people are feeling entitled. They're feeling, well, I had that sort of money, so what are you going to do about it now? I'm in trouble with this. What are you going to do about it now? And when you think that in the next year, Alastair, we are going to pay as a nation £100 billion in interest on the debt that we have. That is more than we spend on defence.
Absolutely.
And and the more the debt comes down, the more money is available to go and spend on other things. But to get the debt down, we have got to tighten our belts as a nation.
Let me put two quick things to you, and I wrote them down when I heard them said to me yesterday on the programme. Sarah Keel, brilliant young small SME businesswoman, runs Baby Cup. She said, if you take 25 billion out of the economy through tax rises and thresholds and the rest of it, that's going to screw me. It means there won't be people who've got the money to come and buy my baby cups. That's a truth across the sector, isn't it?
It's a truth, but it's unavoidable. Because at some point, you have. How else do you do it? I mean, I think the way that he's gone after the better off with the taxing more at 45% is a good idea. I bet they don't like it. That'll take money out, which Baby Cup won't have it spent on them. But somewhere he's got to find this money. Yeah. I mean, the one that I thought you were going to say, SMEs were going to say, is that he's actually reduced substantially the amount of money that you can take out as a dividend before you pay tax on it. Now, small businesses, a lot of small businesses, pay themselves by dividend.
Yeah.
So because basically they don't know month in, month out how much they're going to get, and they level it off at the end of the year with a dividend payment out of the profits.
I'll tell you what I'll do. Only because the clock is against us. Next time, I'm going to ask my producer to get you and Sarah on, because that would be a great item, and you can have that conversation. Final point, and it's a very serious one, and it's Bob Seeley. You know him well, so do I. Tory Member of Parliament for the Isle of Wight. And he said the key thing that ministers have got to do right now, because it impacts on the electorate, on businesses across the spectrum, is get out there and give people some hope. You've tried to do that this morning, but he's right about the ministers as well, isn't he?
Yeah, it's about leadership, isn't it? It's about the fact that you've got to say to people, this is where the sunlit upland is. It's over there. I'm going to take you there. But you cannot have had all this money spent on you, plus this madman in Moscow doing what he's doing, without there being a price. Get realistic, understand it, but we're on your side. We're with you, taking you there. And I defy any member of the Labour Party to give an alternative way of doing this, because when they use words like, oh, we would grow the economy, well, that's lovely to say. You try and do it in the middle of this worldwide recession. And I tell you this, Alastair, and we'll leave it with this, but if business doesn't make money, there is no tax and there are no jobs. And that tax goes to pay for the public sector, who in turn get income and pay tax. But the difference is that a public sector employee gets their money. Forget a pay rise, they actually get their monthly money. If you're in business, especially small business, we're approaching the way where a lot of businesses don't know where the next meal's coming from. And if that happens, you reduce your tax take, and you still need to pay your obligations to pay the wages in the public sector. And of course the nurses deserve it, and of course the teachers deserve it, and our wonderful servicemen deserve it. But it has to come from creating wealth in the private sector. That is a truism. And the more people who understood that, then frankly would get out of this mess more quickly.
Digby, great to talk to you. Love to both of you. Have a good Sunday afternoon, and thank you very much indeed. Talk to you very, very soon. Always delivers. Lord Digby Jones there, former CBI Director General and friend of mine for probably longer than both of us care to remember. I'm delighted to be joined now by another businessman from the front line to give me his reaction to the autumn statement. Nathan Kaider is the founder of Your Coffee Hub, and it's great to see you. You established 3 locations this year around London and are opening a further 2 in 2023. ... Are you still planning to open those extra ones next year?
Good afternoon, Alastair. Yeah, and thanks for inviting me. Yeah, of course we are. I think, look, with any business at the moment, it's all about costs and revenue. It's really simple. And if you understand your costs and you can keep your revenue above that, you'll stay in business. And I think for us, it's understanding our costs. We came into a market, or we came into a time where we understood about the energy costs. And we knew that was counted into our figures every month. And because business are run month to month. But certainly small businesses like ours, where we have to pay bills, we have to pay, staff costs and wages, etc.
Well, I noticed your little head was going up and down as Digby Jones was saying, we've got to do this, we've got to get the money.
We do, yeah, we have to. Look, things have to be paid and money has to be paid back. And if there's debts to be paid back, they've got to be paid back. And what Lord Digby said was absolutely true. We do have to look after the small businesses. If I fail to pay my staff salary, they've got no job. Then what happens? We go back to unemployment again, and the cycle carries on. But I do think, look, we need to cut this debt as quickly as possible. But if you're a small business owner at the moment, I think it's understanding your costs, reevaluate everything, go back to the drawing board, look at your costs. If you have to make sacrifices, make those. And I think that's what Jeremy Hunt did. He made some really tough decisions, but I think very, very good ones.
What about business rates, which a number of people in the SME, can I call you as an SME? Yeah, I think that's small and medium-sized enterprises. There was concern about that, but there's a bit of help in there. But if you look at the overview, not as you as an individual taxpayer like me, but running the business who has to pay the costs and pay the staff, were there particular measures that were good or particular measures that gave you a headache?
Yeah, I thought the £14 billion cut was great over the next 5 years. I thought that was great. And look, I do think they're trying, I genuinely do feel like they're trying to help. However, I think the thing that's crippled everybody, unfortunately, is the energy costs. That's the thing that's taken out of it. It's gone up substantially and people can't put that into their costs and make it work.
And you had to wait initially to know what help you were going to get as a small business. And now we all know that there will be another period of help, but it's going to be less generous. Yep. You began this conversation quite brilliantly, if I may say so, saying you've got to sit down there, you do your sums, like Digby just said, you work out, can I afford it? How close are you to that point where you think, oh, my God, hang on?
Oh, we're on the line. We are on the line. Every month you are on the line. But it's really simple formula. Understand your costs. If you don't know how much you're spending on every single item in your business, you will struggle because you don't know what revenue you've got at the end of the month. You can't understand the market. I can't determine how many people are going to come into the coffee shop and buy a pastry and a coffee and a sandwich. Some might just buy a coffee if they're cutting down. So I need to understand my costs and scrutinise it and make sure that down to the penny, I know what's wasted, what we're spending, staff costs. Yeah. Profit share. We're one of the only coffee companies that will pay a profit share to our staff because we want to keep them invested. That's also got to come into our costs, but we did it at the beginning. Sure. So if you're a business owner, no matter what the circumstances around you, you need to understand your costs. It's 2 things. Costs, revenue. I'll keep saying it to people. Costs, revenue. If your revenue above your costs, you'll be all right.
I hope you don't mind my saying this, but you were a homeless person before you got into the business and set it going. Hard times, tough times. Who helped you get from that scenario into being the elegant and articulate guy that you are today, running your business so brilliantly?
Very kind of you to say. Myself. I think you've got to roll up your sleeves and do the hard work. There's no point relying on other people. As much as we should be able to look to our small circle of friends and our small circle of colleagues or whoever it might be, you've got to roll up your sleeves and do the hard work. And without that, you will struggle. But there's a system which has failed us, and it has failed certainly the homeless people. There is help out there for you, but they're not going out there deep enough, they're not on the streets enough, they're not actually going to the root of the cause of the root of the problem and dealing with it.
Well, I've mentioned this several times before on the programme, but I support Crisis as much as I can do, and they've always made that key point. It's not just kiss and cuddle time. It's about trying to help people get an address, get registration, get an existence within society so they can then bounce into business.
Well, back in the day, we couldn't... So when I was homeless, for me to get onto job seekers allowance, I had to have an address. But if you're homeless, you have no address. So I had to give a fake address at the time. I had to wait for the postman before he delivered the letter to go and collect it before he put it through somebody else's address box. The system is broken. So there's things that can be fixed, but it's not hard to fix those. I think it's quite simple.
The final point is to observe that you said, do the costs, know what the income is going to be. But the third and final point that you've just said so brilliantly is stand on your own 2 feet as well. Get out there and make the effort.
Do the hard work. Look, make your own choices, make your own decisions, because ultimately it comes back to you. It's how you wake up in the morning. Am I going to make this a positive day? Am I going to go out there and absolutely smash it? Or am I going to just see what everybody else tells me what I should be doing on a daily basis? No, go out and make your own fate.
Great to meet you.
And you, pleasure.
And the very best of luck with the new cafes as well as the existing 3 already. That's the founder of your coffee hub, Nathan Kaider. Real pleasure to meet him. More now from the front line of British business. Let me tell you a little story briefly. Lorraine Clark and Sam Day are celebrating the 3rd anniversary of their health and well-being brand, Happy Hemp. They met on the school playground and they later set up their own business to educate others about the benefits of CBD. That's the legal constituent of cannabis. Now, before you go, oh, hang on a minute, that is something that's been embraced by the National Health Service as well, particularly in dealing with behavioural and epileptic patients. And I'm delighted to say that Sam Day joins me now. Sam, if that playground meeting was now, do you think the two of you would still found the business?
No, not at all. Not at all. There's just, there's just no support at all for small business. I just feel like we've been overlooked. You know, there's the vulnerable in society have been completely protected, and they should be. You know, the minimum wage has gone up. That's absolutely right. But for companies like mine, the problem with putting the minimum wage up is that I might have to also reduce staff hours, because if the funds aren't coming in, we can't pay the wages. So it's not as simple for smaller businesses like ours to just up the payroll. And we are on the line. And yeah, it's very frustrating because it seems that we're overlooked. You know, the vulnerable get the help, but us in the middle, we are squeezed in all directions personally, and there's no help for the business. And the larger corporations who are making the massive profits, you know, they can take the hit a little bit more than we can. And I can't see small businesses lasting, because if the people that are buying our products haven't got that disposable income, they're not going to be buying. We're going to go under. It's as simple as that.
It's an intriguing combination of what Sarah Keane said to me on the programme yesterday about the reduction in demand out there because of the higher taxes, and what Nathan was just saying to keep his coffee houses going. You've got to do those numbers. You've got to know what your cost and your potential income is. How close are you to saying, do you know what? Not only would I not start the business now in the current climate, but actually we can't keep the business going now?
It's exactly the same as Nathan. It's on the line every month. It's a matter of, did we get enough sales this month? Is it, you know, is it more than what we're paying out? And if it is, then fine, we're great again this month. And it's been like that for some time now as well. I mean, we did better actually in the pandemic because we're an e-commerce company. Yes. More people were shopping online, so we actually did a little bit better in 2020. But yeah, since last year, it's been month on month. We've had to tread very carefully.
I know I've made the explanation about the product that you produce, so I don't want to waste any time with that, because to me it's fine, and if it's good enough for the NHS, then it's good enough for everybody else as well. But I am intrigued by this, whether or not it is a how can I put it without offending anybody, a cheap and cheerful product so you don't have to be as rich as Croesus to buy it, or whether it's specifically aimed at middle earners, because we understand from both the Office of Budget Responsibility and the Institute of Fiscal Studies that it's those middle earners, the squeezed middle, who are going to take the real kicking from this autumn statement.
Yeah, and I would say it's the majority of our customers are middle earners because obviously there's a certain cost we have to pay out as a business to get the products in. And again, because we're not a massive company, we don't get the bulk prices. So, we may not be as cheap as some companies, but we're competitive on like for like with other brands that are quality like ours. You can get a lot cheaper CBD, but the problem with that is it's not always good quality CBD. So, you do have to pay for what you're buying if you want the quality and the good standards.
Yeah, I absolutely understand that. Final point to you, if I may, and it's right from the very beginning of the programme, so I don't expect you to have been listening to it, but we had Nikki Morgan on, who's a very good friend of mine, former Education Secretary, and she actually gave the autumn statement the thumbs up, and I'll tell you for why she said it, and that was that if it manages to curb inflation and bring interest rates down, then it will prove to be a price worth paying. The other side will be much sunnier. Do you see any merit in that argument?
I don't think so, not for smaller businesses, because a lot of smaller businesses right now, it's immediate help we need. There's not going to be a long term for a lot of small businesses. I mean, we look at lockdown and how it's affected a lot of small businesses. A lot of them haven't made it this far, and a lot of us are on our knees from it all still. And it's just, if we don't get some form of help, we're not going to be able to make it through.
I genuinely wish you well, Sam. I want you to survive. It's a great idea. But much more importantly, this country is not going to survive and thrive unless people like you
Absolutely.
and Nathan and Sarah yesterday do it. You are the backbone of the economy, and I wish you well. Best to both of you, and thanks for breaking into your Sunday afternoon to talk to us. Sam Day. It's just great on this programme. We hear the great and the good, like Nikki Morgan and Digby Jones, but to hear from three fabulous SME leaders, you really get a sense of what it's like out there. My thanks there to Sam Day, the co-founder of Happy Hemp. The time is now 26 minutes past 1. We've a little more to come in the final half hour of the programme. Alastair Stewart and friends after the break. According to the Sunday Times, Rishi Sunak's government is considering a Swiss-style relationship with the European Union. Well, following a YouGov poll revealing that 1 in 5 of you who voted for Brexit now think it might have been the wrong decision. Could Britain be forming a new deal with the EU? Whoa! Explosives. Let's take a quick look at the weather first.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, the UK will be unsettled, particularly in the west, with scattered and blustery showers spreading eastwards. Here are the details. This morning's rain and cloud will continue to affect the far northeast of Scotland, where it will also be rather windy, a mixture of sunny spells and blustery showers elsewhere. This afternoon, a mixture of sunny spells and scattered blustery showers will continue across Northern Ireland. However, these showers will become lighter in nature. A band of heavy showers will affect Northern England. These showers may be thundery with hail for western coasts. There'll also be sunny spells. For North Wales this afternoon, there'll be a continuation of showers, but also sunny spells too. Showers will be less frequent than this morning and will also become lighter in nature, breezy as well. A band of showers will move through across the East Midlands this afternoon, and these may be heavy at times too. There will be more sunny spells too, and showers will ease later on. It'll be a mostly dry and fine afternoon for East Anglia with sunny spells. However, there may be the odd shower in the west of the region later on. Across the south of England, there'll be a mixture of sunshine and showers. These showers will become less frequent and lighter from the west, windy for coastal regions. Turning drier and clearer for a time early tonight before wet and windy weather arrives in the west later. That's how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join me, Arlene Foster, for the briefing on GB News. Every Friday at 3 p.m, I'll give you all the latest political news and analysis, and we'll have robust live debate. To make sure that you're caught up on all of the biggest issues of the day, we'll bring on experts in their field. I'll ask the questions that you'd like to ask. We're not afraid to tackle discussions from all perspectives, including yours. Don't forget, the briefing with me, Arlene Foster, every Friday at 3 p.m. on GB News.
Almost exactly 1:31. I'm Ray Addison in the GB Newsroom. In the USA, 5 people have been killed and 18 injured in a shooting at a gay nightclub in Colorado Springs. According to a statement on the club's Facebook page, a number of customers were able to subdue the male shooter. They're describing it as a hate attack. Police officials say a suspect is in custody and receiving treatment for their injuries. The FIFA World Cup kicks off in Qatar today, the first time the event has been held in the Middle East. The opening match will see the home side take on Ecuador, with FIFA hoping the focus will now turn away from complaints over the Arab nation's human rights record. Players from 9 countries, including England captain Harry Kane, plan to wear a One Love armband, which shows support for LGBTQ people. The Housing Secretary has written to every English council leader and social housing provider, warning that deaths like that of Awab Ishak must never happen again. The 2-year-old died as a result of prolonged exposure to mould whilst living in social housing. Michael Gove says the country must raise the bar dramatically on the quality of housing available. Elon Musk has reinstated Donald Trump's Twitter account after putting the decision to a vote on the social media platform. 51.8% of Twitter users clicking yes in that online poll, which received more than 15 million votes. The former president was suspended in Jan of 2021 after a pro-Trump group attacked the US Capitol. After negotiations through the night, an agreement has been finally reached at COP27 to help poor countries deal with the impact of climate change. The Loss and Damage Fund will help developing nations bear the cost of disasters such as droughts and flooding. However, a decision on exactly which countries will pay into the fund has been left until COP28 next year. We're on TV, online and on DAB+ radio. This is the People's Channel, GB News. Back now to Alastair.
Ray, thanks very much indeed. Goodness me, you've been busy on the emails today. Just one quick one, because it's so brilliant and kind of sums up those first 2 big conversations we had about education and health. Comes from Jamie, who says there needs to be a cross-party agreement on education in the NHS to stop them from being used as a political football all the time. Being used as vote winners isn't good enough anymore. I profoundly disagree with that, Jamie. What I do think we need to have is a profound and open debate about what we want the health service to do for us and what we want the the education service to do for our children as well. That's what we set out to try and do today. But all opinion are welcome, as always, so thanks for that. We'll have some more of your emails before we go off air at 2 o'clock, I hope. Now, just was looking now to see if I can find it, which I think I probably can, because it's there. If you're listening on radio, I am now holding up the front page of the Sunday Times, which says Britain mulls a Swiss-style tie with Brussels. The government deny it, absolutely, as well they might do. But the suggestion very much is, on the front page and deeper into the newspaper, that the government might just be testing the waters about a post-Brexit arrangement with the EU, a bit like Switzerland. Not full membership of the single market, but easier on trade rules. Now, as I said a little earlier, Downing Street rejected the claims. On Friday, however, the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, admitted on BBC Radio 4 that being a part of the single market could boost growth, but it wouldn't be the right way, as it would be against what people were voting for when they supported Brexit. Well, our very own GB News Twitter poll suggests that he's right. And also, a latest YouGov poll, however, reveals that 1 in 5 who voted for Brexit now think it was the wrong decision. If the UK's view on Brexit has changed, could the government take a deep breath and actually deep down welcome a Swiss-style deal? Now, it's complicated, and there's only one person who can resolve it perfectly for me and for you, and that is the pollster, Professor Sir John Curtis, who is Professor of Politics at Strathclyde University, and there he is. Now, it is a GB Twitter poll, and so that may be saying one thing, but the YouGov poll did find a cooling of people's passions for Brexit. What's the Curtis snapshot of where we stand on this vexed issue?
Well, the honest truth is that not just the YouGov polling, but also polling in which people are asked whether or not they would vote in another referendum to rejoin the EU or to stay out, has really, for the course of the last year or so, pointed towards slightly more people being in favour of rejoining than voting to stay out, and that there has gradually been an increasing proportion of people who have said that the decision to leave the EU was wrong. So this got a lot of publicity when YouGov came out with its figure of 56% saying it was wrong, 32% right. But the truth is that YouGov question, which has been asked regularly all the way back to the autumn of 2016, has in recent weeks been persistently showing a gradual increase. So that's not just one-off poll. Sure. It's a very clear pattern, a very clear trend. And the basic history is that when the Trade and Cooperation Agreement was concluded on Christmas Eve 2020 and implemented on New Year's Eve 2020, after that, there was a clear spell of around 6, 7, 8 months when majority of people said, yeah, we should stay outside the European Union. But you will then remember, Alastair, the problems with lorry drivers. And apparently we didn't have enough lorry drivers to deliver the goods to our supermarkets or the petrol to our petrol stations. And that in part, at least, some people suggested was to do with Brexit. And certainly we made it somewhat easier for people in the European Union who had lorry driver skills to come here. Well, that was the point at which that majority support for staying out began to shift towards being in favour of leave. And basically that trend has continued gradually. And we're now on average in polls that ask that question, 58% of people saying I would vote to rejoin the EU, 42% of the opposite opinion.
But within that, there are vital numbers that you and I have talked about so many times, and that is the core Tory vote, already wounded and despondent by rising taxes and slowed down cuts in public spending. On this issue, Hunt's right. There would be real disquiet within the Tory ranks if there was any suggestion of a reversal of Brexit.
Well, 2 points to make there. I mean, the truth is the Conservative Party has lost many of the people who voted for it in 2019 who also voted Leave. I mean, less than half of Leave voters are now saying they're going to vote Conservative. It's not surprising because less than 30% of the whole electorate are saying they're going to vote for the Conservatives at the moment. But certainly if the Conservatives were hoping to regain some of those Leave voters, the party may not want to reopen this issue. But of course, in truth, what we're perhaps talking about here in the end, so far as the Conservative Party is concerned, is not changing the principle of Brexit, which is what you and I have been talking about so far, but rather what should Brexit mean? And you'll remember that Theresa May came up with one vision of Brexit, which basically suggested that we should continue to be aligned fairly closely with the single market, although certainly not members of it. And then Boris Johnson came along and Lord Frost, and they then pursued what became known as the trade as a hard Brexit, whereby we've basically maximised our opportunities for setting our own rules and controlling our own borders. But that is at the price of us making it much more difficult to export to the European Union. So I think the interesting thing is whether or not that debate about what Brexit should mean is going to be reopened inside the Conservative Party. I certainly accept there's no prospect at all of the Conservative Party reversing the principle of us being outside the European Union.
You're so good, John. I mean, that's magic analysis just there. Final quick one, and it's very cheeky, and you've only got 30 seconds. But who's right? Sir John Redwood, when he says in The Sun, the autumn statement has definitely cost the Tory party the next general election, or Nadeem Zahawi on the front page of the Sunday Telegraph saying, if the autumn statement works and we can cut taxes before the general election, we're back in with a chance. Redwood or Zahawi?
Well, the truth is, in the short run, at least, John Redwood is closer to the truth because the 5 polls that we've had so far since the autumn statement show a slight easing of Conservative support, and certainly the bounce that the party enjoyed with Rishi Sunak becoming its leader, that has been reversed, and the Conservative Party is still over 20 points behind in the polls. Now, if the autumn statement works, well, the autumn statement, not the autumn statement, but the Office of Budget Responsibilities report that accompanied the statement said we're going to suffer a 7% decline in living standards over the next 2 years. It's whether or not the Tories can win against that backdrop that's the real challenge, and it's going to be a very considerable one.
John, great to talk to you. Thank you for breaking into your Sunday afternoon to be with us, and look forward to talking to you again any time. Sir John Curtis there, Professor Sir John Curtis, as I always say, the pollster's pollster, but also a Professor of Politics at the great University of Strathclyde. You are watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends, where it is 19 minutes to 2, but even within that 19 minutes, we have more magic for you ahead. I don't think we're doing the next one, are we? No, we're not doing that about Black Friday. That we were going to, but unfortunately we've fallen off the edge. But I think that we will be talking to the great Peter Shilton about the World Cup and what is unfolding in Qatar. And believe me, it really is football as well as all the rest of it. So stay tuned. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends on GB News TV and radio.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me, noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by 2 of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late-night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Hello and welcome back. 17 minutes to 2. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and friends here on GB News TV and radio. Today marks 30 years since the devastating fire at Windsor Castle, which in part prompted the late Queen to label 1992 as her Annus Horribilis. The castle, originally built in the 11th century after the Norman invasion by William the Conqueror, was engulfed in flames, and it was feared that huge swathes of our history and the royal family's history, priceless art and the rest of it would be lost. November the 20th is also Queen Elizabeth II and the Duke of Edinburgh's anniversary, and this year would have marked their 75th. We can cross live now to Windsor Castle, where our reporter Alice Porter is, and brings you right up to date with her reflections. There she is, standing outside the great Windsor Castle. Quite a day in terms of memories and events, both for the royal family and, of course, that fire, which I remember very well because I reported on it at the time.
I know, it's amazing to think it has been 30 years since that day. The fire began in Queen Victoria's private chapel when it's understood that a faulty spotlight ignited a curtain next to the altar, and then the fire began, and it was spotted at around 11:30 in the morning, and then fire services from all the surrounding area from 6 different counties very much descended on Windsor Castle. We saw some incredible footage at the time of very much seeing the castle ablaze, and it was an extraordinary task for the firefighters. It took an incredible 9 hours to bring the fire under control. Luckily, Windsor is a garrison town, so they were able to get some support from the army there, but about 1.5 billion gallons of water were used, were pumped in to try and get the fire out. Now, luckily, the Queen was not at Windsor at the time. She was at Buckingham Palace, but she very much came to the scene to see what was happening, because Windsor Castle was very much her home. And as you said there in your introduction, Alastair, this was, of course, very much a historic part of the royal family, and the artefacts in it were of great concern. And so the firefighters worked incredibly hard to try and save some of this priceless items of art. Luckily, only 2 were lost, but that's really partly due to the firefighters who performed a human chain, really, and were trying to take out these absolute masterpieces one by one. Paul Thomas was one of the firefighters who was there on the scene 30 years ago, and he gave his reflections on that day.
As we sort of turned out onto the M4, we could see the smoke from the fire engine, and as you go down the relief road to Windsor, you could see huge plumes of smoke coming over the top of the castle. And I can remember going into St George's Hall, I think it was. There were some huge paintings on the wall. We got some ladders, and we were up the ladders unscrewing the frames from the paintings and then taking the paintings off the walls, and it was getting smokier and smokier and smokier until we were told then to leave because it was getting too smoky and too dangerous.
That was Paul Thomas speaking there about his recollection of the events. And as you were saying there, 4 days after the fire took place, the Queen gave a very famous speech when she called 1992 and the fire that was the culmination of her Annus Horribilis, because she'd had such a horrible year. The fire was very much, I think, the final straw for the late Queen, because 3 out of 4 of her children had announced their separations that year. And of course, the one of particular sort of notoriety at the time was Princess Diana and Prince Charles. And there was all sorts of very embarrassing leaked tapes, which was very awkward for the royal family. It became even more awkward when there were questions about who was going to pay for the restoration, which was going to be £40 million. In the end, the Queen did pay for it by opening up Buckingham Palace to tourists for the first time, and it was finally completed exactly 5 years later in 1997 on the 20th of November, in time for the Duke of Edinburgh and the Queen's golden anniversary.
Reflections and reminiscences there. Thank you very much indeed, Alice. Great to talk to you. Alice Porter there, our national reporter, in Windsor, just outside the castle, covering 30 years since the devastating fire that happened there and other events as well. Now, after over a decade of controversy of being awarded the Games, the 2022 FIFA World Cup starts today in Qatar as the hosts face Ecuador in Doha. Human rights groups have criticised its treatment of foreign workers as well as its stance on same-sex relationships. England kick off their World Cup tomorrow versus Iran, which is set to be marred by their ongoing unrest at home. But how are England fans feeling about it all? And could football finally be coming home to either England or, of course, to Wales? Let's check in with our West Midlands reporter, Jack Carson, who's been checking out the football fever in Solihull. Jack, over to you.
Well, Alastair, if you want a good idea of what England fans are thinking about their chances at the World Cup, you come to a Sunday League game where people in all kinds of weathers in the winter come out in the freezing cold and the freezing rain, as you can see here now, to play football. And to be honest, some of the goals scored here at the Sunday League match today were worthy of the World Cup. But after the game, I caught up with a few of the players to find out what they were thinking about the World Cup.
Yeah, I love my football, so I'll watch it.
Just as keen, to be fair. Looking off work.
I think that's it. It's a nice time to get together with the lads, sort of thing, and watch football in the pubs and stuff like that, whilst also doing it as almost like your Christmas get-together and stuff like that, so it'll be quite good.
It's a bit different, isn't it? Because it's usually like out of the summertime, innit? Usually around that time. So not many people are at work. You can have time off, especially if I work in school. So it'd be nice for the children to sit down and watch it in the schools as well. So it's a bit different. So I'm looking forward to it. I think the boys will do well. I think it's about time now. We've been very close twice, so looking forward to this one.
Now, did Jack finish then?
Of the winter. And also as well, because of the winter, people aren't necessarily going out to watch the World Cup. 84% of a survey of over 4,500 British consumers that said they were going to watch the World Cup said they were going to stay at home. So those usual scenes that we see at the World Cup in the summer of beers flying everywhere when England scored for this Winter World Cup. There's so many other factors with the cold, the cost of living, as to why people also stay at home. So it's going to be a bit of a different World Cup, but also there is still football frenzy here and people are still willing England on, and maybe, just maybe, this might be the year that we bring football home.
Thank you very much indeed for that roundup of what's happening in Solihull. And to folk at home, let me, he won't have known necessarily, but let me say bye-bye to Jack and thank you, but explain, as Jack said at the beginning there, the weather in Solihull is not great. We lost the signal halfway through, but you had the added bonus there, not only of Jack Carson, our lovely guy though he is, of seeing a quick shot of my next guest. And I'm absolutely delighted to welcome him back onto the programme. We talked about completely different things the last time he was here, but it is the former England goalkeeper, the great Peter Shilton. Peter holds the record 125 England caps, played in over 1,000 league games. You popped up halfway through the previous item. Unfortunately, we're just dead straight-faced and looking grand, as you always do. Let's talk a bit about football first and foremost, because there's a real row that after that bizarre press conference last night from Gianni, that the focus is all so much upon that. Straightforwardly, football. How excited, Peter, are you about the prospects both for England and for Wales?
Yeah, I'm very excited. I mean, there's been a lot of talk about political things, which I suppose you're going to get with Qatar staging the World Cup. I think, you know, when they were given the World Cup, I think everybody was surprised for different reasons, mainly football-wise because of the climate. But we've stopped our season and we're there now. And I think now we're there, we should concentrate on the football. It is the greatest football tournament. And, you know, it's going to be a test, really, because of the climate. Who can cope with game after game in very hot conditions? But I think certainly looking at England, you know, I think we've got a lot more experience of big tournaments the last, World Cup. We finished in semi-final and the Euros in the final, and we've got some good young players coming through, Alastair. So yeah, I think we should be optimistic. But it is an open World Cup. I think there's 4 or 5 teams that I think are capable of winning it.
Sure. There was intriguing debate, both about the selections for the England squad, but also for the Wales squad, about immediate fitness, i.e., reflecting on the end of the season here. But did also the fact that it was going to be held in Qatar and it was so hot and humid and the rest of it out there, would that have impacted on the selections either for the England squad or the Wales squad?
It could have done, yeah, definitely. I mean, you've got to have, really fit players when the tournament starts. There may be, 1 or 2 players that might not start the early couple of matches, but would be available for the rest. So, I think that would be part of the decision making. I'm sorry, I didn't talk about Wales in my first bit because obviously I'm English, but Wales. I think Wales, they'll do okay. I don't think they will have any chance of winning it, but they have got a lot of passion, a lot of pride, and and a lot of skill. So I think they could do well.
Yeah, I have to share something with you, Peter, and I hope she's not listening, but my producer is Welsh, and therefore what you've just said, even if the conclusion was not perhaps as optimistic as she might be, but you covered it, and you covered it very, very elegantly. Final question, and you know better than anybody else. Every time there's a World Cup when England has qualified, there's a song, whether it's football coming home being a resurgent thing or whatever has happened in the past. How do the players manage to put all of that expectation behind them and focus on the job in hand, or are they conscious of the hopes and prayers of people, whether it's in Solihull or whether it's in Swansea? Can they put that behind them, or is that a driver or a negative?
Well, you certainly won't. The players won't know what's going on back in the UK because they'll be away in hotels and they'll be resting and preparing. And they may, with the internet now, sort of catch a bit of it. But certainly when we went to Italia 90 and lost on penalties in the semi-final, we were so surprised when we came home. But I'm sure that that the lads will be aware that the country are expecting big things. We've set a standard now, and they will want to give 100%. You don't go to a World Cup not giving 100% and not wanting to play. And like I say, I think we've got the balance now between experience and youth.
Yeah.
So I'm very optimistic, but I think the first game's going to be a tough one against Iran. They're very, very difficult. They're very difficult to break down. They'll sit back and then they'll break, and sometimes you can get caught. But get a good result there, and I think we'll start flying then.
Peter, good of you to talk to us. Best to both of you. Thank you very much indeed for coming on the programme, and keep in touch. We'll talk to you again soon. The great Peter Shilton there on both England and Wales. Interesting. That first game against Iran will be interesting for all sorts of reasons. I'm afraid that's all we have time for today. Thank you for all of your emails. We may include some next weekend if we can, because they are really profound and very, very helpful. But I will be back next weekend from midday. Until then, I hope you have a lovely Sunday and a terrific week next week. From all of us, bye-bye.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, the UK will be unsettled, particularly in the west, with scattered and blustery showers spreading eastwards. Here are the details. This morning's rain and cloud will continue to affect the far northeast of Scotland, where it will also be rather windy, a mixture of sunny spells and blustery showers elsewhere. This afternoon, a mixture of sunny spells and scattered blustery showers will continue across Northern Ireland. However, these showers will become lighter in nature. A band of heavy showers will affect northern England. These showers may be thundery with hail for western coasts. There'll also be sunny spells. For North Wales this afternoon, there'll be a continuation of showers, but also sunny spells too. Showers will be less frequent than this morning and will also become lighter in nature, breezy as well. A band of showers will move through across the East Midlands this afternoon, and these may be heavy at times too. There will be more sunny spells too, and showers will ease later on. It'll be a mostly dry and fine afternoon for East Anglia with sunny spells, however there may be the odd shower in the west of the region later on. Across the south of England there'll be a mixture of sunshine and showers. These showers will become less frequent and lighter from the west, windy for coastal regions. Turning drier and clearer for a time early tonight before wet and windy weather arrives in the west later. That's how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight.